Bye-bye. Thank you very much. I have to admit that, in fact, Dennis did 99% of the heavy lifting for this presentation this afternoon. But on Monday, I had a eureka moment when I thought, hey, I know how I can contribute to today's session. So I sent out tweets on 2 questions. Oh, this is yours. You know how good I am at computers also. I can just go to my desk. So I sent out 2 questions. What do patients need to communicate, and how do patients need to communicate? And so I repeated that Twitter every 1 or 2 hours for the last 2 days. And people have been sending responses back to me, and back to us, and they've been coming up on the patients involved tweets also. And so I got a small list until yesterday of some of the ideas, 1 word or a few words on what do patients communicate and how do patients communicate. And they're just words for all of us to think about when, in fact, we are considering our messaging to the outside world. Some very, very good ones were engagement, meaningful involvement. Our messages need to be patient-centered, useful, trustworthy. We need to be involved as patients. I even got one in Spanish that said, mejor formado y participativo. In other words, we have to be better educated and we need to participate more. We need more skills. And then someone responded to that one saying, we need more skills, we need more support, and we need more confidence. Then another one followed saying, we need more confidence, and then a smiley face after. Another one said, we need to talk about and always remember the future. It's not only today. Another person said, transparency, 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 3 times. So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind as sort of patient communicators. Another one said, inspiring, we need to be inspiring. Equal partners, another person said, we need to be equal partners. Another person said we need to think nationally, that is locally. What do we need to do on the ground, so to speak? And the last one that I had here is implementation. How are we actually going to implement all the great ideas we have? And so those are some of the words that I asked people to respond to. And then Jack Nunn just sent one today. Jack Nunn was here last year with us in Warsaw. He's in Australia now. He said public involvement. So that's another important one, to communicate thinking of the broader public. So those are some of the words and some of the ways we need to engage with each other when we do communicate. And now I'm going to hand over to the maestro of ceremonies to give us a stronger lesson in social media and how we as patients can contribute.
Thanks, Rob. So just as a prelude to this presentation, I mean, we entitled the presentation, Building an Online Voice and Working Smart in a Digital World. So I see 2 parts to this. I see the voice part and I see the smart part. And I think that's how I structured the presentation. And also, it was too tempting for me, I think, to kind of focus it only on EUPATI. So I took a lot of examples from people that I know and organizations that I admire and that are using these tools phenomenally well to actually get the power out of them for their mission and cause. But I think that through walking through some of these examples here today, you'll be able to take, I hope, some learnings for your own association as well as for your involvement in EUPATI. And what my hope for today would be that you would come away with a sense of having the tools in your hands to create that voice. Because I hear a lot about broadcasting widely, creating awareness for this platform, but I have to ask, how can we really reach our potential as a network to actually reach the kind of level and scale of people that we actually need to reach as part of the deliverables for this project? That's the challenge, really. And I think social media is very much part of that answer, and hopefully we can talk about that here today. So as I said, I have lots of examples about the power of social media, and as well as that techniques that I think at least can help us to work smart. So let's start with Paco, right? Paco is from Spain. He's a good friend of mine as well as being a collaborator. He's a father of a child with atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome. And as well as having his own patient association, he's involved in European Federation. He's from Valencia, so he likes paella. They, in fact, cook. These are some photos from a group, Paella for Solidarity Cause, which they got a whole bunch of people together to raise some money for his association and so on. As you can see, he's very, very active on Facebook. And his big thing is this red bracelet. He has a red bracelet, or a wristband, as they call it, with his website on it, but which he distributes at conferences and so on. But his fetish, if you like, is to get famous people to take photos of famous people with the wristband. So this is the Queen of Spain, who looks quite bemused just after being handed the bracelet. And this is his thing. He also gets people like Suarez from the Barcelona football team to do this. It's a cultural thing. I mean, some countries are very much, I suppose they go after the famous people, because I think if famous people endorse my brand or my cause, well, then it's word of mouth. People will latch onto it. It makes it attractive and so on. It makes it seductive, so to speak, from a marketing point of view. But what I want to say to you here today is, we are all Paco. You can be Paco. I liked what Ingrid said there earlier about creating patient key opinion leaders. And the first step starts with you, right? So to some extent, you can be the ambassador for your cause. Use your mobile phone, internalize that cause, and introduce your personality into that message, because that's what makes it unique and that's what makes it attractive. And I think that's what will help this movement essentially realize much of its potential if every one of us, in our own way, appropriates these tools in a way that's meaningful for us and then reaches out. Because that, if we can scale that to the level of all the patients that get involved in this project, then we're on a winner. And I think there are some great examples out there. We have some examples in the room. I'm looking at you, Jan Geisler, of people who really use these tools beautifully. And I think if we look and learn from them, we can get over the initial fear that we might have. There are people like Dave de Bronkart, who is a cancer patient, widely known now as e-patient. Dave has given TED Talks, is involved in a whole host of interactive, as an interactive stakeholder in a wide variety of clinical trials and so on. He's highly sought after now. In Spain, somebody like Alfonso Aguaron, himself a patient, has a wonderful blog called I Advocate. And then there's a woman like Kate Bushby, who's more of a researcher, but I got to know Kate as she made the journey into Twitter, and she was very scared at the beginning. How do I do this? What if I make a mistake? What if I say the wrong thing? But now you should go and visit her Twitter wall at some point. She uses it marvelously, and she's a real ambassador for the rare disease cause in the worlds that she moves in. And I think if we have these ambassadors who use these tools amongst you, then we will make the national platforms function, and we will make the European-wide platform function. And you yourselves, I think, will become sought after by the media and so on for what you say and how you use these tools. So the second example I'd like to talk about today is a slightly different approach. It's not so much the individual ambassador approach. It's this is Nick Siro. Apart from being a father of 2 children with alkaptonuria, for which he founded the UK AKU Society, sought European funding for an EU clinical trial network, multi-centre trial financed by an EU project funding, also succeeded in raising over $130,000 via crowdfunding to support the travel and for all the participants in the trial. An incredible man, a real achiever. As you can see, he gets around. This is Nick in his previous life, working in solar power and with Bill Clinton. So one of his most recent initiatives is called Find a Cure. He calls it the Fundamental Disease Partnership. The idea around this, just by way of background, is his idea is that if by researching into the mechanisms of action into certain rare diseases, we can understand more prevalent diseases, well then there's a win-win for everybody, and it's a model that we could explore further. And he calls this the fundamental disease model, by understanding, I suppose, the fundamentals of the mechanisms of action and so on. So one of the missions of Find a Cure is really to build a capacity building and empowerment entity in the UK to help patient groups really reach the level of capacity that he feels, or to deliver on the potential that he feels patient organisations can give. He conducted a survey, and as you can see, some of the concerns of the patient groups in the UK really centre around lack of awareness and lack of medical understanding. So there's a huge battle that we're still involved in, believe it or not, in the awareness campaign and in the battle for understanding as a patient movement that has potentially many years to go before we really can kind of break out of that, I think, because there's still a lot of work to do to build the capacity of the patient groups. And so, that's what part of EUPATI is as well. But what the message I took from this example is the brand. I want you to look at the brand, think about the way he set it up and differentiated it and communicated around it, made it, I suppose, somehow little idealistic, but very hopeful and very full of it has its own energy about it. That's what I wanted to. That's really what I wanted you to take away from that, because I think, in some sense, at the national platform level, in order for this brand of EUPATI to go out there, we need to think about ways in which we can kind of position it. And so that's where I'm going bit by bit. The next example is the French telethon. So for those of you who don't know about the French telethon, I think it's one of these great miracles. It's the French Muscular Dystrophy Association, which some years back now, they took the example from the telethon in the United States, and they got the French public television to give them 30 hours of national public television. They mobilized hundreds of thousands of volunteers all over France. They have this wonderful, they light up the Eiffel Tower, they have all these events all over France for one day for the cause of finding a cure for muscular dystrophy. But it's gone beyond that, because really the money that they raised was the seed funding really that gave Eurordis its start, and with that funding we were able to use it as leverage funding for co-funding for other projects and for European projects and so on, and it gave us that legitimacy. And the European, I think, framework for rare diseases owes a lot to the work of the French telethon. And let's look at how they created their voice for a second. Right? They have their 5 core objectives, which are to make rare diseases visible, heighten public awareness, convince governments and institutions, share knowledge, and to be accountable. Right? That's quite similar in some ways to what the EUPATI project aspires to on some levels. They collect 100 million euros a year from the telethon, which I think is astounding. Right? Now, the breakdown of that is even more interesting, because the television show brings in 40 million. The volunteer network, who run events on the street and so on, brings in almost another 40 million. These figures are from 2011, which was in the middle of the economic crisis as well. And they bring in 18 million from the internet, which I just think is mind-blowing. And their internet strategy going forward is that they want to bring in 20% of their donations from the internet. They have quite a large following on Facebook, but they really use things like mass mailing. If you have your e-news or your database of mass mailing, they rely on that. They want a mobile strategy, and they have specific, e-partners as well to help them. Their values. I'm going back to this because, when you create a voice, you need to go back to your identity and who am I and who are we as an organization. And their values really around solidarity, innovation, transparency are some of the more salient and visible values that they wish to communicate. So that's just, the money that they raised this year, 92 million euros. And they had a wonderful thing as well, just before I leave them. In the middle of the crisis, when the financial sector was had quite a bad rep, I suppose, they went to the French stock exchange and they asked the stock exchange to trade a specific financial instrument just for the day of the telethon, and they got all the traders involved, and they traded this stock for the day. And I don't know how many thousand they managed to raise, but it was in the middle of the stock market was going down that day, but they managed to raise a lot of money for rare diseases. So here we come to this kind of wheel of archetypes, is what I'd like to call this. This is the result of a study by a very prestigious communications agency called Millward Brown, where they analysed several brands, and they got 500,000 people to come up with words that represented a brand. Because ultimately, and I think it plays the same for non-profit organisations, we are perceived in a specific way, and our hope is that people perceive us in the way that we've structured our communication. Because if they're not, well, then there's something wrong. So you could say, that something like the telethon is more of a, I suppose, could be called a wise, trustworthy, entity, but it has an element of playfulness to it too. you know? Something like the Nick Zero brand that I showed you earlier with the Find a Cure, you could say that's more of the brave, adventurous, and still has an element of the dreamer or the idealistic. And where I'm going with this really is, I think it's important for you on your national platform level to judge from the cultural sensitivity of your audience where you want to position yourselves. Because we heard that in Italy alone, there's 10,000 patient organizations, almost 10,000 patient organizations. There's ever more people clamoring for this space. So what you really need to be doing is thinking of how do you differentiate yourself from the nearest people in that space, because that's how humans work. We tend to compare things to alternatives. So if you have a difference, that gets your attention, but it has to really be a meaningful difference that will convince somebody that you are for them, right? So that really, I suppose, brings my thinking full circle in terms of how you create a voice. I hope that kind of gives you a sense of the spectrum of the tools that you can look at, and when you analyze how you want to position either yourself as an ambassador or the national platform, or indeed the supra platform or network in terms of the European collaboration side of it, that will give you some tools. There are just one or two things that I want to tease out before I move on, what I call kind of constants and variables in that. I mean, I think that you need to position yourself in somewhere in between having dynamic leadership or passive leadership. I mean, you can be a very passive leader by bringing people together into a room and allowing their consensus to emerge. I mean, that's an act of leadership, but it's a very passive way of doing it. In other cases, you may need to have a much more dynamic sense of leadership because the situation just needs it, and it has to be a little bit more autocratic, and you just say, here, there, we're going there. So you need to position your voice as you create it on these tools, on social media, somewhere in between the two. The same with the whole, what they say, ruggedness, which is an English word which means kind of rough or outdoors or tough versus sophistication. Sometimes you need to be tough, and other times you need to be a little bit more sophisticated to kind of build the consensus that you need. But you can't be so sophisticated that people don't understand you. Sometimes you have to be a little bit tough and simple so that people will understand you. And then that's always underpinned by integrity and what they call nurturance. I mean, we talked about it earlier, the whole idea of the transparency of this platform, because as you go forward and reach out to the media, I mean, already there is a perception around the industry getting involved with patient organizations. What does that mean? How does that work? So the integrity piece really needs to be sorted in this, and it needs to be a kind of a foundation of your communications as you move forward. And the nurturance is important too, in the sense that people perceive that you care. You know, so just to remind ourselves of that. So as an exercise in positioning, you might want to say, you know, what's innovative or different about my national platform? Are we straightforward enough? Does our mission to care come across? How playful or serious should we be? Because the question came up in the group that I was in earlier about young people. You know, if we want to attract young people to this, we need to position our voice maybe not as playful, because I mean these are serious issues we're talking about, but in a way that somehow seduces them or makes you seem attractive to them. So that's just to remind us again of that wheel of archetypes where you'd like to kind of put yourself. So being smart, I turn to Homer Simpson for guidance. You know, being smart really is, I think, about, you know, using the tools available to us with the time available to us in the most intelligent way possible. So let's look at a couple of examples. I mean, of typical examples of campaigns or messages that people need to get across as patient organizations. It could be an access campaign, an advocacy campaign, an awareness campaign, specifically an information campaign, or even fundraising. The most important, I think, thing about being smart using social media is you have got to get used to being multi-channel. That means being in several places all at once. You know, people expect to see you, you know, where they want to see you. So if it's Facebook, you have to be on Facebook at a certain time of the day. If it's Twitter, they want to see you on Twitter. If you have a blog, you have to invest in cultivating that blog, and so on. If you're into YouTube, you need to feed that YouTube channel with video content and so on. So you need to think, the first thing is it's important to be multi-channel. You don't have to use all the channels, but choose the channels that you want to use and find and adapt the best way of using them, right? That's what I'm saying about combinations. So you could go for a campaign that's completely social media only, right? You could go for a campaign that's social media plus a website or a microsite, as they call it, which is a dedicated site to a campaign, which I'll show in a second. It could have some tools like a position paper or a video to influence people about the cause that you're trying to get their attention for, right? If you're having an event, make it a hybrid event. That means doing what we're doing today, have a webcast, have the Twitter wall and so on, and actually dedicate somebody to welcome people when they come to the online event and so on, so that people understand that, okay, I'm not there, but I'm all like a producer who's there to welcome you and answer your comments and chats and so on. Online petitions are interesting. They could be for you, could not be for you as you go forward. There's crowdfunding as well, which is not necessarily relevant, obviously, to EUPATI, but it could be relevant to your patient organisation. And there are very interesting other tools. We saw the importance of mass mailing, or e-newsletters. I mean, we in the breakout group that I was in earlier as well, there was the Italians, I think, or the UK, sorry, had a very interesting example of how they sent different newsletters to different stakeholders involved in their platform. As you go forward, and EUPATI has some very ambitious goals, you may want to look at advertising using Facebook or Google. Google have a non-profit program, which, if you're ready, could be beneficial for you. Eurordis has applied for that, and we got $100,000 of free advertising on Google last year. The Facebook advertising is relatively cost efficient. And so depending as you go forward, you might want to look at that, and on a national level as well. I mean, obviously this comes with the clause of funding, so I don't want to dwell too much time on it.
Before you go on, about the Google fundraising, did it help? Did you notice a difference of more people coming to your site and so forth?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we were in the world of rare diseases especially, it's vital because people are searching for very specific and very rare symptoms or very rare specific nouns and names for which there's very scant information. So by being able, and for which we weren't organically showing up in the rankings in some cases, and so we were able to position ads for specific keywords so that the Rare Connect project was able to get the audience. And we could see when we have all the analytics to be able to show the impact that it had. And very soon, I mean, we maxed out on you're allowed 10,000 euros a month, more or less, dollars a month, sorry. And right now we're maxing out. We can't actually keep up with the demand. So it does work, yeah. There's an application procedure.
It's just a question that we really come up against is how to best spend the money we have. So just to make sure that it in fact works and it's not just an idea.
No, it works. You have to apply for it. It's not, the application doesn't work for every country because obviously Google uses this as a kind of, they write it off against taxes. So they have to be able to have that fiscal flexibility in the country. So I know that we applied for it via Google France. Because Eurordis is based in France, but you would have to apply for it from the country where your statutes say you're based. So not every country is involved in the Google nonprofits program, but I'd explore it. And then there's a thing called retargeting, which is, I won't go into it now. It basically means sometimes if somebody visits your website and goes away, well then they'll see an ad about your website on Facebook, but that's like science fiction, I suppose, for us now. Let's get into some examples. Right, we're doing okay for time. This is a specific example that I'd just like to talk you through very quickly, and hopefully we might be able to get some lessons for it. It's an access to treatments campaign that was launched by a patient group in the UK after the National Specialised Services Advisory Group, AGNES, recommended that a specific treatment be reimbursed. The UK health ministers decided to kick that back to their health technology assessment body, NICE, and that had a devastating effect for patients. The treatment is extremely costly. It's almost €500,000 per patient per year. It's one of the most expensive in the world, but it is highly efficacious. If you don't have it, this is how you end up. You have kidney dialysis at home. And this was their campaign. This is how they structured their voice and worked smart. That's why I think I chose this example. They set up a microsite bringing together all of the stakeholders, so the doctors, various other people involved, including the patient group and so on. And they created, from a first point of view, I mean, I think so they call it AHUS Action, AHUS being the disease in question. I mean, it's very evidence-based, very sober in one sense, but it's also very dynamic in the sense that it's calling for action. So there's a kind of a strange dichotomy here. On the one hand, they're almost trying to be quite rebellious, but at the same time, they're presenting some very evidence-based information in order to get their message across around the impact, both from a social and an economic point of view, on not having the treatment in order to move forward. And this campaign worked for them. They were able to engage with the payers in the UK and talk to them about really what it meant to have this treatment and get their message across, and that led to negotiations with the company and so on. So that was a microsite kind of approach. A second approach is more of an advocacy approach. I speak because I suppose from Eurordis's point of view, I have the experience to do it. So Eurordis advocates for rare diseases to be an international health priority. Right? We have a position paper which advocates for that, and that's digitally available on the website. We went one step further. A couple of years ago, we did a survey of 12,000 patients. We published the results and analysis in a book that were presented to the EU Health Commissioner on Rare Disease Day. On that occasion, we combined the social media around a live tweet stream from the event. There were videos available on demand, and as well, obviously the book was available as a digital PDF. And that then led to an advocacy, I suppose, strategy which resulted in the Commission communication and recommendation for rare diseases and so on, which are levers themselves, which we are still implementing at this time. So, social media is always there and should always be part of your communication strategy or your advocacy strategy. I like this one a lot. This is a social media only campaign. It's cheap and cheerful, it's light, agile, cost effective, but has huge potential, I think, for viral impact. You might recognize some of the people here. I know there's some people in the room. Anita, Jan. So this is Jan's Patient In, Not Out campaign to really allow patients to attend the exhibition spaces at medical congresses, where in some countries patients aren't allowed because the regulator has decided that the information is not fit for patient consumption, which seems outlandish in this day and age. But I love this campaign. It's using social media to, very quick, very agile. You too can do this, right? Awareness campaigns are becoming ever more common. Because as we saw, I mean, if your disease if you don't have an awareness, your disease doesn't exist in the minds of many medical professionals and in the minds of society at large. So it's important for you to be able to put a face on your disease. In this context, social media is definitely one of your best allies. And going forward in raising awareness, I think for EUPATI, social media will certainly be one of your great allies. And people often say about these awareness campaigns, there's one every day. Every day is a day for something. It's true, and it's true maybe that there is a saturation, that media are getting tired of it, but it is having an enormous impact internally on your community, on the communities I'm seeing that are doing it. So even if every day is a day for something, the impact that it has on getting everybody together in your community to do something and to build that sense of common identity and to see that grow over a period of years is marvelous. And I think that's almost more important somehow than the actual awareness thing, although we should never lose sight, obviously, of the goal of reaching more people and getting awareness. So that's just, I'm preluding that by this example. This is the example of the Blue Lips campaign for pulmonary hypertension, which is one of the symptoms of having pulmonary hypertension, is that you can end up with a lack of oxygen and your lips can turn blue. So they've turned this into something positive to some extent in terms of being a mark to raise awareness for the actual disease in question. And they did a nice thing a couple of years ago whereby they got, I don't know how many tens of thousands of kisses on a postcard sent to them, and they broke the Guinness Book of Records for the most kisses sent to them. So, that's another way of being smart, I think, and using these two tools powerfully. Lastly, it's not, as I said, maybe not be relevant for EUPATI, but I do think it's important to just keep in mind for your own associations the importance of crowdfunding. I'm seeing it a lot. I'm seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly, in the sense I see a lot of crowdfunding campaigns that don't work because people, I don't think, understand how to do it properly. But I do think that if you take the time to understand how it's done, it can be phenomenally valuable. I think that the three tips I would give anybody is really analyze your membership. Think about who are your members and who are their families and who are their friends and who do they work with. Because that will give you a sense of the potential really of the backbone of your campaign, because they'll be the people that be putting in the 5, 6 euros or 10 euros, to get it started. And then if it goes further and it mushrooms, well and good. But you need to really get that sorted first, and then that will give you an idea of the target that you can go for as well. It's important to make a video. It can be simple. It can be with your phone. simple, but it has to be emotive. Not emotive, but it has to be impactful. It has to really tell me in 30 seconds why this is important, and it has to connect with me as the potential donor. And it's also important to what I call front load the campaign. So the day of the launch, make sure there's some money in there so that it doesn't look so sad. You know, people go there, there's some money in there, they get involved in the dynamic and they give it. This is one that we did. We supported a patient group in Spain. They needed 14,000 euros to complement a research project for which they had public funding, but they needed an extra 14,000 euros co-funding for ectodermal dysplasia. And this guy, Ignacy, has 2 children with the disease. This disease essentially means, one of the symptoms of the disease, I suppose, is that you don't have sweat glands. So you can potentially, your body can't regulate its body temperature so effectively, and you can potentially end up with a mortal hypothermia, which in countries like Spain is not, it's something that you have to bear in mind, where it can get quite hot. So I loved his slogan. So he decided to run the Barcelona Marathon for his kids, and his slogan was excellent. He said, "I'm going to sweat because my kids can't," and that was the video. And we raised 75% of the money in 72 hours. So we raised 12,000 euros in 72 hours. The money just kept coming in, and it was phenomenal. So much so that we could have gone higher, but we didn't. We needed, that was the target we needed for the research project. So it really opened my eyes to the potential of this, but you really need to do it properly. I mean, I see a lot of crowdfunding projects languishing there in a lot of these platforms. Finishing up with some tools. I mean, you can count on us on Rare Connect. Last year we had over 500,000 visitors. So as you go forward and want to get the word out about aspects of EUPATI, please, you can count on us. And if there are any rare disease patient groups in the room that would like to get involved with their peers in other countries to build an international online patient community, available in 5 languages, safe, moderated, and so on, you can contact us and get involved and work with us on Rare Connect. Some tools, again, to be smart that either you can use or tell your comms people to use. There's wonderful tools like free called Hootsuite, which allows you to listen to what's going on social media. It allows you to schedule some of your tweets. You always want to be a bit reactive, but sometimes you need to be smart and use your time effectively, so you can schedule some of your tweets to go out over the next couple of days. You want to be obviously listening as well via Google Alerts. There was the Google AdWords that I mentioned earlier, and then things like Google Analytics to show how effective you are in using the social media tools. So before I go, I would like to hand over to Laura here to talk to you just about the directory of national platforms that is now available on the EUPATI website, and I took a look at it, and it's great. It's coming on really nice. I like the way some of the national platforms are harnessing Twitter and Facebook now. There's pilot Facebook groups, and the way you're using Twitter, and I think you've got off to a great start. Now it's a question really of fulfilling the potential by using the tools, and I would really say to you all, look at that ambassador approach. Really, for those of you that feel comfortable or feel that you'd like to get involved in this, start using the tools and start sharing, because I think that'll make a big impact. Then the national groups will formalize their own way of communicating as they're doing via this, and then you'll have the centralized body which will bring things together. So thanks very much for your attention this afternoon. I'd like to hand over to Laura now.
Thanks, Dennis. And Dennis has been thrilling us with lots of exciting sort of fancy ideas. And I think now I'll just bring us back a little bit to the basics. So in terms of what we're setting up for the 12 countries that will have national teams and national platforms, we have a section on the EUPATI website. You can see here the tab, National Platforms. And when you click on that, there's a link to each of the countries. And under that, you have the details of your national team, if it's in place in the country at that time. You may have a link to their Facebook feed. You may have a link to their Twitter feed, and there may be a video wall. And so this is where we'd like to get people to visit, to let them learn a little bit more about what's happening in their country, learn about who is doing some of the action in their country and how they can get in touch with them. There are email addresses there. And of course, we'd like you to then go further and go into the Facebook pages, go into the Twitter pages. And the idea really is that you can get a little bit more information about what the national team, in terms of the national team committee, has planned for the coming months, but also that you would share this further within your organizations and that we could then like your organizations and vice versa. So the whole idea is to really get this national networks of like-minded people all connected on social media, and then we'd like to get thinking about some of these fancy ideas for the end of this year and next year, because we think that can really make an impact at the national level.
So before you go away, Laura, I have a question about the national networks, Twitter pages and Facebook pages. How active are they, and who sort of runs them? I mean, I know that someone has to be behind it, and there are very few resources. So how does that work maybe in the 4 big countries that we have right now?
Yeah, and in terms of all of the people involved in our national platforms at the moment give their time voluntarily, and normally one of the 3 stakeholders sort of appoints a communication focal point, and they take the lead for communications at the national level. So they provide posts on the Facebook pages, they do regular tweets, almost daily tweets. And in terms of some of the impact, I guess we could look at the moment to Spain, who had a really good start on Twitter. They launched their national platform in November of last year, and I think within 4 weeks they had over 300, 400 followers. So they were really good in terms of linking up with the right people and then asking those people to feed into their networks. So, I mean, it's just a small start in terms of, you see how many followers others have, but that got us off to a good start over 4 weeks.
Great, thank you. Can I ask, is Danielle still out here? Danielle Gil? Could you give a little word on how easy or difficult it was to set up the Spanish Twitter and Facebook pages, and how you maintain it? Yes, please.
And Daniel is our sort of comms expert in Spain, so he's been helping us out, but he's very busy with a range of different things.
Well, really, at the very beginning, before that presentation in November, we just created the profiles in Facebook and Twitter. For me, it's a surprise what Laura said, that we engage very soon with many people, because those first weeks, perhaps after the presentation, we didn't have a lot of use of the profiles. But then we have, in the group of 9 organizations that we are into the platform, into that executive board, there's a girl from a lupus association in Madrid, Nuria Zúñiga, that she's a very expert in social media, and she has assumed the leadership of our social media profiles. And now, I don't know before, but now she's doing a very good job.
So maybe one take-home message would be for each national group to find someone interested and capable of doing communications work. Yes. to hold that part.
Yes, that's very important. This girl, she does it very good, but she also likes it very much. So she's enjoying it.
Great. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dennis, I wanted to come back to you and ask, with all those, thank you, Laura. With all the slides you showed, and you sort of sparkled us, as Laura says, is there a right way or a wrong way of doing certain things? Should we try everything that you listed, or is there maybe an easy way forward where we can cut to the chase, so to speak?
No, I would strongly recommend, again, not doing everything up there at all. I mean, I think you need to be, we have very limited time, all of us, so we need to, I think, pick 1 or 2 priorities and pick 1 or 2 channels that will work for us. It seems for you guys that the national Twitter handle, along with the Facebook page, might be sufficient to get started and just grow that, because then you'll find, as you say, the right people, which will lead to the right people, which will lead to more right people. So I would stick with that for now and grow it and get it to something credible. But it's already credible. I mean, from what I'm seeing, at least on the Twitter side of things, the Facebook takes a little bit more time sometimes. Keep it at that and grow it. But you then need to choose, as I said, hopefully using some of the tools that I gave you in terms of what voice you want to use in the country and in the cultural kind of context that you are in, and depending on who you're trying to attract or influence. Just then you can be flexible, right, depending on the country.
Okay, and the other question I had was regarding crowdfunding, is that at first you seemed to be a little wary of it, but then you showed us a really good example of how you did it. And I know that AKU, for example, did 2 crowdfundings that worked pretty well. So is it something worth investigating and maybe doing for small amounts of money that maybe that would be perfect for the national teams?
It could be. It's more challenging, I think, for things that aren't research or based around the cure of a specific individual or a specific group of people, I think. So it could be, there are certain challenges, I think, that you would face in terms of being a national team and finding, you know, a way to communicate that in a very impactful way that would get people to say, okay, I'll give this €2 or €3 or €5 or €50. So you'd need to address that, but it's not. I wouldn't see it as impossible. Mm-hmm. I would maybe be modest around the target that I would look for, and I would really analyze the core audience that I would be going at for the first amount of money. But it's more of a challenge, definitely, than for a research project or, you know, something that's much more therapeutic. That's my first feedback. But it's something that would be worth looking. I mean, Wikipedia have a donation strategy which is very interesting. You know, it's not a crowdfunding strategy. It's an online donation strategy. As you're looking at sustainability going forward, you may want to look at something in that line as well, because of the core mission of EUPATI. You know.
All right. I would really appreciate some questions from the audience, but I want to start by asking a question to Hirsch from Novo Nordisk, because I think it's very important that we've heard a lot from patients and from NGOs and from academics, but we really haven't heard from industry, especially regarding this integrity and the fact that industry is involved, and is that going to hold us back? And should we just be honest and upfront with it? I think that industry needs to help us formulate those answers clearly, and I bet you have a really good answer because you live it every day. And I don't mean that, Hirsch, you need to talk about that specifically, but I would like you to talk a little bit about national messaging, national communications as well. I don't see anyone coming to the microphone. Maybe he's gone. Is Hirsch gone? Great. Oh, you're not Hirsch, but okay.
I'm Simone Silenzi, I come from Italy. I represent the group Italia Glioblastoma Multiforme Cancro al Cervello, a form of brain cancer. I am interested to talk about this argument because I created in 2009 a group in Facebook, an experience of a laboratory, a collective laboratory, and is very interesting because 5,000 people meet in this group, and that is interactive group, and it was interesting also for the president of European Cancer Patient Coalition, and also for FAVO, is a federation of 600 associations. I can say 2 things, some proposals, some suggestions. I can say the risk of communication is dispersion, fragmentation, so is important consider the goals of an association of EUPATI. I think EUPATI can be dialogue, can talk with server, with social network, leader of social network, because we have to think that EUPATI is something connected with a European Commission. So we can propose to a Facebook leader and a Google leader and other social network a way to put an interactive way, because today both Twitter, both Facebook and Google are instruments sometimes only to fun, but I already verify that is possible change. I already met a representative of Facebook, for example, in Italian Parliament, she said it's possible change the instrument because we have to pass from passive users to a builder of these instruments, because capillarity is very important argument. We have to use in an active way the social network, not only passive way. I am available to continue this discussion, this argument, because I think it's very important for the EUPATI experience is possible.
I totally agree. I think the interactivity is absolutely the key to the game, especially in social media. It just can't be one way. But if I could get back to, I asked Hirsch to stand up and just to talk to us, I guess, from a pharmaceutical or an industry point of view about communications. But you and I were talking earlier about the importance of communications on a national level, where that's really where we're going to have the biggest sort of bang for the buck, if you will. If so, I'd like to, and everyone else from industry, you can prepare your answers regarding industry transparency and integrity part, while Hirsch talks a little bit about us working on a national level.
I mean, earlier I was just saying to Rob, sorry, I can kind of hear my own voice, this is really strange. I was saying to Rob that I think that in terms of EUPATI, it's great that we've going to have 100 people who are trained by the end of next year. But the way the project can really take off is at the national level. It's when patient organizations are using the toolbox that will be developed to train people at the national level. It's when we're actually getting the stories out at the national level, talking to politicians, to regulators, to the media, and so on, and making a difference in the local languages at the very, very, very basic low level. And I don't think that this project can actually be all that it can be if we're just talking about training people at the European level. There's so much more it can be, but that really requires people in the national platforms to create networks and to use those networks. And for there to be, what Rob and I were talking about were actually the fact that Rob's coordinating comms at the European level. I'm on the comms task force with him. And we can make all the strategies and all the plans we like at the European level, and we can have some influence. But actually there needs to be a plan for every single for every single national platform to have their own comms plan, for that comms plan to cohere with what Rob's doing at the European level, and for us to really push this forward.
And most of these things that you were talking about are actually implementable on a national level. They don't have to be a European level at all, correct?
Correct, absolutely.
Yeah. So I've seen a few faces out here. Great, go ahead.
Just to address your issue, I mean, this is the European Patients Academy on therapeutic innovation. And therapeutic innovation doesn't get to patients if it isn't the involvement of the pharmaceutical industry or the devices industry. So I think we are absolutely crucial to be at the table. And you've done it really well at the European level. And the question then is, how do you do it at the national level? And most people are comfortable with multiple companies being involved. So I think the only message I would give people is that don't go with one company, because then you've got the conflict of interest concern. But if you keep it broad, and if you go with the national pharma industries or several stakeholders, then the combination of a combination of stakeholders and complete transparency should deliver what you're after.
Great, thank you. I think that's a very smart way forward. Please.
This is a platform, and therefore I would like to raise totally different questions. I'm working in the pharmaceutical industry, and I like to listen to social media, But social media is an issue for us because in social media I could see product-related adverse events, and therefore product-related adverse events. Once I'm interested in what's happening about product blah blah or in indication blah blah, what are patients interested, I could find a comment saying I took and I got a headache, and I'm required to communicate this information to my pharmacovigilance department. And they have to research whether this has been already communicated, if this is a new case, if this is an old case, and even if it is Mickey Mouse 17 who has communicated this, posted this message, they are required to send an email to the provider of this platform. Please tell us who is Mickey Mouse 17, and then to send out a letter to Mickey Mouse 17 and to ask, have you already communicated this adverse event to your physician? Please fill out this form, blah, 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 blah. And therefore, they told me, be careful in listening, or at least try to avoid to listen. And I'm not sure whether everybody in this room knows this issue, and maybe how you can help us. Or if there's a solution, even if I'm doing it privately, saying I will do it at my home office, in my home office, I'm still representative of a pharmaceutical company, and therefore I'm required to communicate these adverse events to my pharmacovigilance department. And therefore, currently, I'm avoiding to
Social
listen.
media.
Or you would create adverse event-free zones of social media, but I don't think so.
Please, I'd like someone, hopefully there is a good example of a company that does follow social media. But I know companies have Facebook pages and so forth, so how do they deal with that, please?
Hello, I'm Claire from the National Rheumatoid Arthritis Society in the UK. And just in response to that, it is a major issue. We have a social media platform, if you like, called Health Unlocked, and lots of other patient organisations have pages on there. And there is an awful lot of talk about particular brands of drugs that I tried XYZ or ABC or whatever. And likewise, we have to monitor that very carefully, of course, for all sorts of other reasons. But we as the patient organisation, if we see that there is an adverse event, we have an obligation as well to pass that on and try and link with the pharmaceutical company in relation to that product. But it does add on lots and lots more work for the already tight resources that we have. Sure. But likewise with our Facebook page or Twitter or anything like that, again, if somebody said my left arm dropped off when I took, whatever, then naturally we as a patient organisation would be under the same sort of obligations in some ways.
All right.
I have something just to add to that. I mean, it's slightly out of the scope, I think, of what we were talking about today, but given that you raised it, the technology is evolving, and that there is a pilot project at the European level as part of the IMI, of the Innovative Medicines Initiative called Web Radar, which is bringing to Europe a project that was conducted in the US with FDA. And it's with a company called Epidemico, who are a linguistic analysis algorithm designer company who have an app called MedWatcher. And essentially what they did in the US, they're hoping to replicate it in Europe, but what they did in the US was they analyzed everything that is coming out of Twitter and Facebook that is publicly available, so not the private stuff. And they were able to map all of the slang terms onto medical vocabularies and with mesh terminology and so on. And they were able to create a real-time capture of what people were talking about with regard to adverse events and create reports, treatment-based, specific product-based reports, which they provided to the FDA. And the interesting thing was that the results were almost exactly the same as from the traditional form-based reporting methods, but with fraction of the cost and in real time. So this is coming to Europe, so that in a matter of years we will have technology available to the regulatory agencies to be able to keep up with the social media. How industry will get involved in that obviously will remain to be seen. That will be part of the governance of this particular project at IMI. But anyway, let's continue.
Great. So I'm just going to pick on you, Susanna, because I see you right there in the front. Just consider yourself lucky, Mary, that it wasn't you. But please, no, this is a really serious issue. How do we not maintain our integrity, but voice our integrity and transparency to the whole wide world, and not be ashamed of being a public-private partnership, because that's what we are and who we are, and we should be able to say that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Susanna Leito from Novartis Oncology. I think that I share with all my colleagues the fact that we are all in the same attitude. So we always are very proud of what we do with patient groups. We are always very transparent of what we do with patient groups. Okay, we are even obliged to do it because we have a code that is the EUPATI code on our relation with patient organization. But we saw a new era. I started the work as a patient relation manager 10 years ago, and really we saw the advance of the involvement of patient groups in everything, also with policymakers. So I really feel offended when someone is saying that we know the usual comment that the patient group are in the pocket of pharma and so on. I think that every patient group that is really serious know how to relate with patient with industry, and every industry, serious industry, know how to. We know that we have common interests, and we know we have divergent interests. It happens, I think, to a lot of us in the industry to be challenged by patient organization on something we do or we say. So I feel even, and I feel EUPATI is a fantastic project. We had a DIA discussion of various IMI projects, and I think the beauty of IMI project also that put together a lot of companies in a very non-competitive way. Not only in working with patient relations, but also working in research. Matthias was saying that at the DIA meeting several times. So this is, I think that also speaking with my colleague, I say this on behalf of all of us working in EUPATI.
Great, thank you very much, thank you. So we're at the end of the hour right now. Dennis, do you have any final words for us to take home? Great, so thank you very much, Dennis, once again for the presentation.